we're going to talk about a movie that you may have never even heard of before. But believe me, if we made a list of the biggest box office disasters in film history, its name would stand right alongside those movies on which hundreds of millions of dollars were spent, only to be met with complete disappointment. The name of this film is Desert Warrior. Now the question is, what exactly went wrong with this film? Was the movie bad? Did audiences not like its story? Or was there some bigger reason hidden behind it? Because often, a film's failure isn't just due to mistakes visible on the screen. Many times, the real story is written behind the camera. And Desert Warrior is exactly that kind of case. It wasn't just a film. It was a dream. An ambitious project. An attempt to prove that even in the middle of the desert, you could create the grandeur of the world's biggest films. But history is witness. When the burden of expectations on a film grows heavier than it should, that very burden often pulls it down. And something similar happened with Desert Warrior. The film's story takes us into the world of ancient Arabia. A world where different tribes are struggling for power and survival. There is political tension. The threat of war looms. And everywhere, there's a race to gain dominance. In the midst of this atmosphere, the story of a princess emerges, one who refuses to accept her fate. Her rebellion gradually turns into a larger conflict. On paper, this story sounds quite interesting. And honestly, it had all the potential to become a grand historical epic. But there's a huge difference between potential and final result. The biggest problem with the film is that it fails to create a strong emotional connection with any single character for the audience. When you watch a movie, you need to connect with someone. You should care about someone's victory. Someone's defeat should make you feel sad. But in Desert Warrior, that connection feels very weak. The characters are there, but they lack depth. The conflicts are there, but they carry no real emotional weight. The wars are there, but the emotions behind them don't fully reach the audience. And this is why even the film's massive scale fails to hide the shortcomings in its storytelling. Now, if we talk about the film's biggest strength, it's its visual presentation. At many points, it feels like you're watching a massive big-budget painting come to life. The vast desert landscapes. Distant mountains stretching endlessly. Armies kicking up clouds of dust. And the preparations for war. Everything looks incredibly grand. There are many frames that make you feel like the filmmakers spared no expense. But this raises an interesting question. Can beautiful visuals alone make a film successful? The answer is no. If that were true, every big-budget film would be a superhit. Audiences don't just watch with their eyes. They feel with their hearts too. And when the story fails to touch them, even the most spectacular visuals eventually lose their impact. Another major issue with the film is its pacing. Some parts move too quickly, while others feel unnecessarily long. Many important events pass by so fast that you barely have time to feel their impact. And there are scenes that feel like they're stopping the story rather than advancing it. Because of this, the film's flow keeps getting interrupted. Now let's talk about the action. Because after all, this is a historical war film. And in such films, audiences expect spectacular battle sequences. Desert Warrior impresses in some places. In some battles, the scale is visible. In some moments, you feel the danger. But overall, the action doesn't deliver the kind of impact you'd expect from a film with such a huge budget. Many times it feels like the film is showing war, but not making us feel the consequences of it. Viewers see people fighting, but they don't feel what the real cost of this struggle is. And that's why even the big war sequences don't become truly memorable. The film's music is decent. It tries to build the atmosphere of the story. But it doesn't create any iconic theme that stays in your head long after the film ends. Now the biggest question. Why did such a big film flop so badly? The real reason wasn't just one thing. Many small and big problems combined to create a perfect storm. A long production. Delays in release. Weak promotion. Story problems. and a lack of emotional connection with the audience. All these things together weakened the film. By the time the movie finally reached theaters, the excitement it needed around it was missing. And then what often happens with such films happened. Audiences simply ignored it. The saddest part is that Desert Warrior doesn't show any lack of hard work. You can feel that hundreds of people must have worked on this project for years. Huge sets must have been built. Shooting must have happened in tough conditions. Thousands of big and small decisions must have been made. But the world of filmmaking is very harsh. Sometimes years of hard work cannot compensate for the lack of one thing we call a strong story. And perhaps this is the biggest lesson from Desert Warrior. Money matters. Technology matters. Locations matter. But above all of these is the story. Because in the end, audiences remember what made them feel something. Not just what tried to impress them. Desert Warrior is not a bad film. But it is a film that never reached its full potential. And maybe that's what makes it even more interesting. Because sometimes, the biggest failures leave behind the greatest lessons. And Desert Warrior is one of those films. So far, we've seen how Desert Warrior was prepared as a massive project. But the real test of any film begins when audiences try to connect with its story and characters. And this is exactly where Desert Warrior's biggest problems start to surface. The film's story is set in an era where different tribes are locked in a fierce battle for power and survival. Everyone wants strength. Everyone wants to protect their territory and honor. And in the midst of this conflict, we meet a princess who refuses to accept the future that has been decided for her. On paper, this sounds like an incredibly compelling story. Because stories like this have always attracted people throughout history. A seemingly weak person challenging the system. Some people join her. Others stand against her. And thus begins the struggle. But Desert Warrior fails to develop this idea with full force. The biggest reason lies in its characters. In any great historical film, the characters are its greatest strength. Audiences should understand their dreams. They should feel their pain. The impact of their victories and defeats should reach the heart. But that rarely happens here. The princess's character is certainly important, but her journey often feels incomplete. The film repeatedly tells us that she is destined to become a great leader. Yet we don't get enough moments where she actually proves her worth through her actions. A strong character isn't built just by delivering dialogues. It is built through decisions and struggles. And this is where the film falls short. On the other hand, there's the warrior character. He is mysterious. He is dangerous. And at first glance, he seems quite intriguing. But as the story progresses, we learn very little about him. What is his past? What is his real motivation? What does he fear? What are his dreams? The film doesn't show much interest in answering these questions. And when audiences can't understand a character, they fail to form an emotional connection with them either. This is why many important scenes don't deliver their full impact. Now let's talk about the film's villains. In any historical epic, a memorable villain is extremely important. Audiences should feel how great the danger is. They should understand exactly what the hero is fighting against. But Desert Warrior's antagonistic side doesn't become nearly as impactful. Yes, they have power. They have an army. They have resources. But their personalities lack the depth that would make them truly memorable. A great villain isn't great just because he has power. He is great because his ideas and goals challenge the story. Here, that challenge feels weak. And when the opposing side feels weak, the thrill of the conflict also diminishes. Another major problem with the film is its emotional distance. Many times, huge events are unfolding on screen. People are dying. Wars are breaking out. Kingdoms are in danger. But the audience doesn't feel the emotional punch that one would expect. The reason is that the film doesn't spend enough time with its characters. It seems eager to rush toward the next big scene. And in that haste, the emotions get left behind. Now, if we talk about the technical side, the picture looks completely different. This film is stunning to watch. Every desert shot feels grand. The camera often creates frames that could be put on posters. Sand sparkling in the sunlight. Endless stretching mountains. Galloping horses. And the movements of massive armies. Everything is shown on a truly epic scale. This is why many scenes look extremely attractive in the trailer. But the biggest rule of filmmaking is this: beautiful images cannot replace a story. If stunning visuals were enough, every expensive film would be a superhit. But that has never been the case. There are many films in history that had strong stories but small budgets, and they still won a place in audiences' hearts. On the other hand, there are films with massive budgets but weak stories, and they were forgotten after some time. Desert Warrior falls into this second category. The film impresses you many times, but it rarely touches you emotionally. And this difference is what separates a good film from a memorable one. Now the question is, was the weakness of the story the only reason for its failure? Or were there even bigger problems behind it? Because when we look at its production and release story, we realize that the real struggle wasn't happening in front of the camera, but behind it. And this is the part where Desert Warrior's story becomes even more interesting. So friends, up until now, we've discussed the film's story, characters, and its weaknesses. But honestly, the real story of Desert Warrior wasn't written on the screen, it was written behind the camera. Because often, the biggest battles in a film aren't fought by its characters. They're fought by the people making it. And Desert Warrior is a perfect example of that. When this film was first announced, there was a lot of excitement around it. Huge budget, international cast, grand locations, and a project that was being called a potential game changer. In the beginning, everything looked promising. But slowly, the problems started surfacing. In any big project, the most important thing is a clear vision. Everyone involved needs to know exactly what the film wants to be. But when different people start pulling in different directions, things become difficult. That's exactly what happened with Desert Warrior. The film wanted to be a historical drama. At the same time, it also wanted to be a large-scale action movie. It needed to appeal to modern audiences, while still preserving a historical atmosphere. When one film tries to become too many things at once, it often fails to fully succeed at any of them. This is where its identity started to blur. Then came the production challenges. Shooting in the desert sounds as exciting as it is tough in reality. Imagine sand everywhere, scorching heat, hundreds of cast and crew members, horses, camels, heavy camera equipment, and millions of dollars being spent every single day. In such conditions, even a small mistake can become extremely expensive. It's said that completing the film required enormous planning and resources. And the bigger the project, the bigger the risk. Time kept passing. Months turned into years. And slowly, what every filmmaker fears started happening. People started forgetting about the film. In the film industry, timing is crucial. If a movie stays stuck for too long, audience excitement begins to fade. New films arrive. New trends emerge. And the old buzz dies out. Desert Warrior got trapped in this same cycle. By the time it neared release, most of its initial excitement had already vanished. But the problems didn't end there. Because marketing plays a massive role in any film's success. You can make the greatest film in the world, but if people don't even know it exists, why would they buy tickets? This is where Desert Warrior struggled the most. Many viewers didn't even know the film was releasing. Just think about it. A movie on which hundreds of millions of dollars were spent. Yet the general audience had almost no idea about it. This is a dangerous sign for any big project. And then came the release day. The makers hoped the film would slowly catch on. Maybe good reviews would help. Maybe word of mouth would spread. Maybe it would get a second chance. But that didn't happen. The opening was very weak. And within a short time, it became clear that the film was in serious trouble. A film's fate at the box office is